All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
Today we're kind of doing like like your favorite newspaper,
Yeah,
with both local news here in Nigeria and then also just, what's going on globally.
that's right. A little bit of everything.
Yeah, so a lot to cover. Why don't we jump right into it with some local news here?
It sounds good.
Okay, so one of the things that really kind of stood out um, was from the Accountant General
Okay.
that Nigeria's negative public assets have hit N33 trillion.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty big number, and I think it's important to sort of break down what that means for the average person.
Yeah.
It basically means that the government's liabilities are significantly outweighing its assets. So
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
think of it like if your own personal debts were more than your savings and your possessions combined by quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can lead to a lot of financial strain. It can limit the government's ability to invest in things that are important, infrastructure, education, healthcare, all that.
Right. So like things could be delayed
Or
or, or
exactly.
maybe harder to get, foreign investment if.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes it much harder to attract foreign investment because people are going to be looking at that and saying, well, is this a stable place to put my money?
Right.
And so it's something that, we all need to kind of keep an eye on because it could really start to impact our daily lives in a variety of ways.
Okay. So it sounds like the Senate is already maybe thinking about solutions here
Right.
because they're exploring ways to boost the revenue for the federal government.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to figure out how to increase revenue. And that could mean a number of things. It could mean potentially new taxes. It could mean raising existing taxes.
What
It
could
could mean exploring other avenues for income. But yeah, it's something to watch closely because, any changes in policy could directly impact your wallet.
Right. Yeah. So we got to keep an eye on what's happening there. And it seems like there might be some debate about this because Senator Ndum has called President Tinubu's tax reform bills dead on arrival.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong statement, and it really suggests that there's some serious opposition within the Senate to these proposed reforms. So,
Okay.
we could see a lot of political maneuvering and negotiations happening behind the scenes to see, will these bills actually be implemented or will they be modified? Will they be scrapped altogether?
So yeah, this could be a really long process
It could be a long process.
of going back and forth.
Absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Okay. Now switching gears a little bit. Remember those 119 miners who were detained
Oh, right.
after the NSARS protests?
Yeah.
Well, the federal government has released them.
Yeah, finally.
Yeah, and so I think that's really sparked a lot of conversation about, freedom of expression
For sure.
and, the right for young people to participate in these protests.
Absolutely.
And so it'll be interesting to see, going forward, what's going to happen. If anything like this were to happen again.
Yeah, how will the government respond going forward? Are they going to be more tolerant of protests or are we going to see more of the same?
Right.
It's definitely a question that's on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now turning our attention to security, there was a concerning incident in Imo State
Okay.
where a bomb explosion resulted in some casualties.
That's awful.
Yeah. And so I think, obviously this is a huge reminder
Mhm.
that there are security challenges, all across the country.
Absolutely. And it really raises questions about, what needs to be done to address these security challenges because clearly the existing strategies aren't always effective.
Mm-hmm.
We need to look at more comprehensive approaches
Yeah.
to tackle the root causes of this violence and instability.
Okay. Now, on a more positive note, the Nigerian Navy has been pretty active in trying to combat illegal oil refining.
Yeah.
And so they shut down 3 sites in Bayelsa State and seized a boat involved in these activities.
Yeah, it's great to see them taking action on that because, these illegal oil refineries, they're not only, funding criminal activity, but they're also having a devastating impact on the environment.
Right. Yeah.
The pollution from these refineries, it's just horrific. It's polluting waterways, it's harming ecosystems.
So this is good for everyone.
It's good for everyone, absolutely. It's good for the environment. It's good for the economy. It's good for security. It's a win-win all around.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's take a look at some sociocultural developments.
Mm-hmm.
Governor Oyebanji of Ekiti State has appointed an acting Chief Judge Justice Liken Edekanye Ogunmoye.
Okay.
And so, these judicial appointments are always significant because they can really have a lasting impact on the legal system.
Yeah, for sure. A chief judge plays a really crucial role in shaping, the direction of the judiciary, making sure that justice is administered efficiently and fairly.
Right.
And so, this appointment could potentially influence, how laws are interpreted, how cases are handled, the whole legal landscape in a key state.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, and finally, some good news from the business world.
All right, I like good news.
Abapa Customs has reported over N1.8 trillion in revenue in just 10 months,
Wow.
which I think is a sign that things are going well there.
Yeah, that's really impressive. And it's a good sign for the Nigerian economy as a whole.
Yeah.
It suggests that there's a lot of trade activity happening, which is, great for boosting employment, generating more revenue for the government.
Right.
It's definitely a positive sign for economic growth.
So that covers some of the highlights of the local news here in Nigeria. Now, before we move on to what's happening in the wider world, don't forget you can stay up to date on all these stories by subscribing to Foresight News TV on YouTube. They provide daily news updates so you'll never miss a beat.
Absolutely.
Now let's widen our lens and see what's happening on the global stage.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so one thing that's really been dominating the headlines is the U.S. presidential election.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
And it's interesting because even though it's happening all the way over there in the U.S., it's having a direct impact on markets globally.
Yeah,
Including, here in Nigeria.
absolutely. We were just talking about the economic challenges that Nigeria is facing, and, the U.S. election, it's creating a lot of uncertainty in the global markets, and that uncertainty, it trickles down. It affects everyone.
Right, and we are very connected in this globalized world.
We are all connected.
So it makes sense that, what happens over there would affect us here.
Absolutely. And, it works both ways. We were talking about those impressive revenue figures from Papa Customs. That's a sign that Nigeria can benefit from a strong global economy.
Right.
When things are going well globally, it creates opportunities for countries like Nigeria to really, grow and thrive.
Yeah, we have so much to offer, in terms of our natural resources and our people. And so it's just a matter of, understanding these global trends and figuring out how we can, leverage those strengths.
Exactly. We need to be smart about how we position ourselves in the global economy so that we can attract investment and create more opportunities for Nigerians.
All right, so before we shift our focus completely away from local news,
Okay.
there's a couple more stories I want to mention.
Right.
Governor Duye Diri of Bayelsa State has been making headlines with his stance on the oil pollution in the Niger Delta.
Right.
He's actually demanding both reparations and a comprehensive cleanup from those responsible.
That's great to hear because, this issue of oil pollution in the Niger Delta, it's been going on for decades.
Right.
And it's had such a devastating impact on the environment, on the livelihoods of the people who live there, on their health.
Yeah.
It's just a terrible situation. And it's encouraging to see a leader like Governor Diri taking a firm stand and saying, enough is enough. We need accountability. We need justice. We need action.
Right. It's not just a global issue. It's affecting people here.
Exactly. It's a local issue with global implications.
Okay, so now for something a little bit lighter.
Okay.
Nigerian music superstar Davido Gallon. He's actually in the U.S. right now.
Oh, wow.
And he shared how excited he was to vote in the U.S. presidential election for the first time.
That's interesting.
I know it's kind of funny, but I think it's also really cool to see how elections can capture the imagination.
Yeah.
Even those who may not be deeply involved.
Yeah, it's a reminder that democracy, it's not just about, casting a vote. It's about being engaged. It's about being informed. It's about, using your platform to encourage others to participate.
Right. And so he was really doing that.
That's great.
Okay, so now back to some of the more serious issues we were discussing.
Okay.
The conflict in Gaza continues to escalate.
It's just heartbreaking to see.
Yeah, and so I think it's really capturing global attention right now.
Absolutely. It's a tragedy that's unfolding on the world stage, and it's a reminder of the human cost of conflict. The loss of innocent lives, the suffering that's happening. And it's a complex issue. There are no easy solutions.
Right.
But it's one that demands the attention of the international community.
Yeah.
We need to find a way to bring about peace, to find a lasting resolution to this conflict.
And then while we're talking about global security, North Korea's recent missile launches have raised concerns.
Yeah, those are definitely worrisome.
Yeah, and it just makes you wonder, Is there potential for escalation?
Absolutely. North Korea's nuclear ambitions, they pose a very real threat to regional stability and to global peace.
Hmm.
And so it's a situation that requires, careful diplomacy, international cooperation to
Right.
try to de-escalate tensions and find a path towards denuclearization.
Yeah, okay. So shifting our focus back to the U.S.,
Okay.
the election itself is facing challenges.
Oh, yeah. What's going on?
There's been a lot of concern about election security and the potential for fraud.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, the FBI has even issued warnings about possible bomb threats.
That's concerning.
I know. And so it's scary because it kind of makes you realize how fragile these democratic processes can be.
Absolutely. Any attempts to interfere with elections, whether it's through violence or intimidation or, disinformation campaigns, is just unacceptable.
Right.
It undermines the whole foundation of democracy. And so it's really crucial that authorities take these threats seriously and do everything they can to ensure that the election process is fair and transparent and secure.
Yeah. And speaking of security, it's encouraging to see the Nigerian Navy taking action against those illegal oil refineries
Yes, definitely.
we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. Their efforts to shut down those sites in Vale State, it's a really important step towards protecting our environment and our resources.
Right. And it's a good reminder that, protecting the environment isn't just about conservation. It's also about enforcing laws
Yeah.
and cracking down on these illegal activities.
Absolutely. We need to hold those responsible accountable for their actions.
Right.
And, make sure that we're safeguarding our natural heritage for future generations.
So back to the U.S. election for a moment.
Oh,
It's looking like it's going to be a really tight race.
yeah. All the polls are saying it's neck and neck.
I know. And so those swing states that we talked about earlier, they're going to play a huge role in determining the outcome.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The battle for those swing state votes is going to be intense.
Hmm.
Both candidates are going to be pulling out all the stops, trying to sway those undecided voters.
And it's going to be a long night.
It's going to be a nail-biter for sure.
Waiting for the results.
Absolutely. But, even beyond the immediate drama of the election, there are other global issues that we need to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Issues that are going to continue to shape the world regardless of who wins the presidency.
Right, like what?
Well, one of the biggest ones, of course, is climate change. We're already seeing the impacts of a changing climate all around the world, from extreme weather events to rising sea levels, and it's an issue that demands urgent global action.
And this is happening now.
It's happening now. It's not a future threat.
Yeah.
It's affecting communities, ecosystems, economies worldwide.
Right.
And so it's something that we need to be talking about. We need to be acting on.
It's a global challenge.
It's a global challenge, and it requires global solutions.
So it's going to require cooperation from governments, businesses, individuals.
Absolutely. Everyone needs to be on board if we're going to address this effectively.
And speaking of global cooperation, the situation in Gaza really underscores the need for a unified international response.
Absolutely. It's a humanitarian crisis that demands immediate attention and coordinated efforts to provide aid and support to those affected by the conflict.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of these global challenges, but it's important to remember that even small actions can make a difference.
I completely agree. Whether it's staying informed about these issues, supporting organizations working towards solutions, or simply engaging in thoughtful conversations with others, every effort counts.
And that's what I appreciate about these deep dives. They provide a platform for us to explore these complex issues together, to share insights, and to hopefully inspire some positive action.
Exactly. It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge and using that knowledge to make a difference in the world.
It's amazing how events on one side of the world can ripple out and affect us here in Nigeria. We were just talking about the economic challenges we're facing, and now the U.S. presidential election is having a direct impact on global markets, even ours.
Yeah, it really highlights how interconnected we all are in this globalized world. When a major economy like the U.S. goes through a period of uncertainty, everyone feels it. But on the flip side, think about those impressive revenue figures we saw from Apapa Customs. That's a sign that Nigeria can tap into those global trade flows and actually benefit from a strong global economy.
Exactly. We have so much to offer in terms of natural resources and human capital. By understanding these global trends, we can leverage those strengths to attract investment, boost our economy, and create more opportunities here at home.
Absolutely.
Now, before we completely shift our focus away from local news, there are a couple more stories worth mentioning. Governor Duyi Diri of Bayelsa State has been making headlines recently with his strong stance on oil pollution in the Niger Delta. He's demanding both reparations and a comprehensive cleanup from those responsible.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. That's a critical issue that has been plaguing the region for decades.
Yeah.
The oil spills have not only devastated the environment, but also had a profound impact on the livelihoods and health of communities in the Niger Delta. It's encouraging to see Governor Derry taking a firm stand and pushing for accountability and environmental justice.
Yeah, it's a reminder that environmental protection is not just a global issue. It has very real and immediate consequences for people right here in Nigeria. Now, shifting gears for a moment, let's talk about something a bit lighter, sports and entertainment. Nigerian music superstar Davido, who's currently in the U.S., has been sharing his excitement about voting in the U.S. presidential election for the very first time.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. It shows how elections can capture the imagination and engage people from all walks of life, even those who might not typically be deeply involved in politics. It's also a testament to the power of democracy and how it can inspire participation from beyond national borders.
Right. It reminds us that civic engagement is not just about casting a vote. It's about being informed, raising awareness, and using your platform to encourage others to participate in the democratic process.
Absolutely.
Now, back to some of the more serious issues we've been discussing. The conflict in Gaza continues to escalate, and it's a tragedy that's capturing global attention.
Yeah, the situation in Gaza is a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the urgent need for peaceful solutions. The ongoing violence and the loss of innocent lives are heartbreaking. It's a complex geopolitical issue with deep historical roots, and it's a situation that requires the international community to come together to find a lasting and peaceful resolution.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of global security, North Korea's recent missile launches have also raised concerns about potential escalation and threats to international security.
Right, those actions are certainly worrisome. North Korea's nuclear ambitions and its willingness to test ballistic missiles pose a serious challenge to regional stability and global peace. It's a situation that requires careful diplomacy and international cooperation to de-escalate tensions and find a path toward denuclearization.
Yeah, it's a delicate situation for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, so shifting our focus back to the U.S., the election itself is facing some serious challenges. There have been growing concerns about election security and the potential for fraud, and the FBI has even issued warnings about possible bomb threats.
Oh, wow, that's really concerning. This is a worrying development, and it highlights the fragility of democratic processes. Any attempts to interfere with elections, whether through violence, intimidation, or disinformation campaigns, are completely unacceptable. It's crucial for authorities to take these threats seriously and ensure that the election process remains fair, transparent, and secure.
Absolutely. And speaking of security, it's encouraging to see the Nigerian Navy taking action to combat illegal oil refining. Their efforts to shut down those sites in Bielsa State are a step in the right direction to protect our environment and resources.
I agree. It's a reminder that protecting our environment is not just about conservation, it's also about enforcing laws, cracking down on illegal activities, and holding those responsible accountable for their actions. It's about safeguarding our natural heritage for future generations.
Absolutely. Now back to the U.S. election for a moment. It's shaping up to be an incredibly tight race. And those swing states we mentioned earlier are going to play a decisive role in determining the outcome.
Yeah, the battle for those swing state votes is intense. Both candidates are making their final pitches, hoping to sway undecided voters and secure enough electoral votes to win the presidency. It's going to be a long night of anticipation as the results come in. But beyond the immediate drama of the election, there are other global issues that deserve our attention, issues that will continue to shape the world regardless of who wins the U.S. presidency.
Right. What are some of those?
Well, one of those issues, of course, is climate change. We're already seeing the impacts of a changing climate around the world, from extreme weather events to rising sea levels, and it's an issue that requires urgent global action.
Right. Climate change is not a future threat. It's happening now. It's affecting communities, ecosystems, and economies worldwide. It's a challenge that requires collaboration between governments, businesses, and individuals to find solutions, reduce emissions, and adapt to the changing climate.
Yeah, it's a massive challenge, but it's one that we have to face head on.
You know, it's fascinating how seemingly isolated events can actually trigger a chain reaction across the globe. Take the release of those miners in Nigeria after the #EndBadGovernance protests. It sparked conversations about freedom of expression and human rights, not just here at home, but internationally.
Right, it really highlights the power of social movements and how they can resonate far beyond their immediate context. It's a reminder that we're all interconnected, and what happens in one part of the world can inspire and influence change in others.
And speaking of global events that resonate beyond their borders while all eyes are on the U.S. election, it's important to remember that other countries are holding crucial elections as well.
Oh,
Moldova, for instance, just wrapped up its presidential runoff, and pro-Western incumbent Maya Sandu secured a second term.
oh yeah, that's right. Moldova's election was particularly significant given its proximity to the ongoing war in Ukraine and concerns about Russian influence in the region. Sandu's victory is seen as a win for those who advocate for closer ties with the West and democratic values.
It definitely underscores how elections can become battlegrounds for competing ideologies and geopolitical alliances. It's a reminder that democracy is a constant process that demands vigilance and active participation.
Absolutely. And speaking of vigilance, we can't overlook the growing importance of cybersecurity in our increasingly digital world. From potential election interference to data breaches, the threats are constantly evolving.
It's like a digital arms race, where those with malicious intent are always looking for new ways to exploit vulnerabilities. It's more important than ever for individuals, businesses, and governments to prioritize cybersecurity measures and stay ahead of these threats.
Precisely. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive, I want to touch on a topic that's been weighing heavily on my mind, the humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza. The ongoing violence and suffering are deeply concerning.
The situation in Gaza is a tragic reminder of the human cost of conflict. It's imperative that the international community work together to find peaceful solutions and provide humanitarian assistance to those affected by this crisis.
Absolutely. And while it's easy to feel overwhelmed by such tragedies, even small acts of compassion and support can make a difference. Whether it's donating to reputable aid organizations or simply raising awareness about the situation, every effort counts.
Every voice that speaks out against injustice and calls for peace contributes to a collective movement for positive change. And that's what I find so inspiring about these deep dives. We start with a seemingly diverse set of news stories, but as we delve deeper, we uncover connections, identify patterns, and gain a richer understanding of the complex worlds we live in.
And through that understanding, we become more informed, engaged, and empowered citizens.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought. Knowledge is power, but knowledge without action is like a seed that never gets planted. What will you do with the insights you've gained today? How will you use your voice to make a difference in the world? These are questions worth pondering, and I hope our conversation has provided you with some food for thought. And for those of you who want to stay informed and dive deeper into these issues, be sure to check out Foresight News TV on YouTube for daily news updates. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to make the world a better place.